Hi, happy Thursday. I hope everyone had a great 4th of July. Excited to be here for another Instagram Live. For those people who don't know me, I'm Lisa Solomon, founder of Athenium Collective. And I started Athenium Collective to create courses with industry experts in the fields of marketing, advertising, and media. And we are here to educate and empower people with great information. And I'm excited to today with Bonnie Tsai from Beyond Etiquette, and she is joining us right now. She's connecting. Oh my God. Hi, Bonnie. How are you?
Hi, Lisa. I'm good. How are you?
I'm good. First of all, I have a huge thank you for doing this. For people who don't know, Bonnie's actually in Taiwan. And so it's 3 o'clock in the morning there, but being a good friend and dedicated to her business, she woke up so that she could do this with us. So
I'm
I
excited.
appreciate that. I'm
Thank
excited too.
you.
I've been thinking a lot about you and etiquette and just so many things that are happening in the world right now. Every day, it's like there's so many things changing, and I feel like it's changing just how we interact with people and, how do we be, I don't know, I guess better people in terms of using etiquette for, making really the world a better place in some ways. And I just think you have such an interesting perspective on it. And I just love, for me, it's so interesting because there's so much history into why we do the things that we do, and even just how what we believe are, good behaviors versus bad behaviors. And so I really wanted to talk today about what are those, how are they changing, and what does good etiquette mean in the business world, and why does it matter? And I also wanted to touch on this because I've been thinking a lot of this around being I'm reading this book on what if I say the wrong thing, and it's all about culturally having better cultural habits. And I also want to make sure that when we talk about etiquette and manners, we're not talking about it from the point of view of elitism, where it's a class structure versus these are good manners, good behaviors because they help everybody. So again, just was thinking about that today as well. So before we begin, why don't you tell everybody a little bit about your background and how you founded Beyond Etiquette?
So, hi, everyone. I'm the founder and director of Beyond Etiquette. So, we're a consulting agency that's focused on etiquette and communication. And the reason why I say and communication, because I believe that etiquette is great for opening doors and creating opportunities, but communication is what's going to help you build long-term, lasting relationships. So, the whole reason I founded Beyond Etiquette was because I felt like I founded Beyond Etiquette almost a year and a half ago now. And I felt like there's a huge lack of empathy and kindness going on. Everyone's about like, oh, it's all about me, 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 and what I want. It's not what about what the next person wants or needs. And the essence of etiquette has always really been about putting others before yourself and respecting their needs and being considerate of others and kindness. So when people are asking me like, oh, like isn't etiquette just for like the 1%? And I'm like, no, it's never been for the 1%. It's always just been about putting yourself in someone else's shoes. So I love giving this story. It's like, let's say you and Lisa, we were going on a trip to Italy right now. We're sitting at a table in Rome. Let's imagine that for a second, right? Before COVID right now. And
Yes.
so and we're sitting down for lunch and we ordered a pizza, but we do see utensils like a dinnerware laid out in front of us with a plate, right? And the pizza comes and you decide to you grab at the pizza with your hands and then you just start eating. Like there's no like we're just chatting, you start eating. So the thought popped into my head like, okay, so do I now eat the pizza with my hand like you were doing, or do I eat with a fork and a knife? Like, even though I know how to eat the pizza with a fork and a knife, I'm not going to do it because it's about making you feel comfortable around me. So there's no point of me being like, oh, well, this is the right way of eating pizza. There's no right
Yeah.
way of eating pizza. It's just whatever is everyone else is comfortable with. Because if I start eating with a fork and a knife, you're going to be like, well, what is she doing? Like,
Yeah.
why is she eating with a fork and a knife? Like, am I now eating the pizza wrong?
Interesting. So yeah, so it is about the behavior that becomes socially acceptable in that situation.
Exactly. And it's just really etiquette's really just guidelines for you to have like in your inventory to kind of be like, okay, I know how to deal with this situation. I know how to best deal with the situation because I have all these ideas, all these guidelines to help me to put my best self forward, to put my best foot forward.
So would you say that etiquette and manners is the same thing?
Almost, yeah,
Yeah.
essentially, I think so. Because I think people just have this stigma against etiquette where they think, it's got to be this Eastern European woman who's holding a stick and has her hair up in a bun and telling everyone, you're doing this wrong, you're doing this wrong, you have to have your back, like you have to sit up straight, you have to do whatever it is. But the essence of etiquette has never changed from the beginning of time till now. It's just the rules around it have evolved with time because we have new technologies, we have new things that happen, like, COVID happened, so now the handshake is gone, right? So we talked about yesterday, like handshake dates back to like the Byzantine area, Babylonian era, sorry. So like people came in order to show that we're not a threat. We're not carrying any weapons with our hands. People came with an open hand to show that I come in
Right.
peace, I am friendly, and here's a handshake. And that's how the handshake really started.
I think that's what I think is so interesting about this is that what started for one reason and how it's sort of been developed into something that we all do. And now we're in the situation where from a hygiene point of view, especially with COVID, shaking hands is a no-no. Like you just wouldn't do that. So it's kind of interesting to see what is that, what are those becomes the social norms out of this? Like how are we going to be greeting people? Because there is this connection you want to make. And how do you make it's weird to meet somebody and not do something that signifies I'm happy to meet you.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Like sometimes I also still have to remind myself that I'm like, okay, we can't shake hands right now. So I remind people that I'm like, communication is key right now because we are all adapting to this new normal for us. And so like, let's say someone does approach you with a handshake, like they forgot or they're just used to it, and be like, if they're like, you can say like, oh, it's such a pleasure to meet you, and like I would love to shake your hand, but I would like to keep both of us safe. And it's
Yeah,
not just,
exactly.
oh, it's just about me. I only want to keep myself safe. But you're like, I want to keep us both safe. But thank you for extending out your hand, and I really appreciate it. It's just how important communication is, especially during these really weird times. And that you just never know what the other person might be going through in terms of, do they have a sick relative? Do they have a baby at home? And you don't want to put them at risk, not just only yourself.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I think, just taking COVID as an example. So we know greetings have completely changed, right?
Yep.
Because meetings, we're not seeing people anymore face to face. And now we have this entire world of virtual, talking about communication, of virtual, Zooms and Teams and all these different ways to connect with people, even what we're doing right now. How does that kind of change the way you think about, what are some of the etiquette and manners that you are starting to see kind of shift and change because of the world is so virtual?
I think a big thing that, when we all started sheltering in place was, having people talking about, oh, it's so nice to see other people's house, like inside their homes and what their life is like outside of the office. And, when they have like pets kind of crash like conferences, which is,
Yeah,
I think,
my dog that was just barking.
which I think is great, because it really gives not only just your colleagues or your boss, but also like your clients, vendors, people you actually work with, to see a different side of you. And so I think there was a debate going on, be like, oh, should pets crash a meeting or not? And I'm on that they should crash a meeting because it kind of gives you something else to talk about, but they shouldn't become the distraction of the meeting. So like I think they can come either like when the meeting first starts for them to say hi to everyone, or when the meeting is about wrapping up and they're like, oh hey, like there's your dog, and everyone kind of ends on a happy note. Be like, okay, we now know what we have to do, but we also have this side entertainment. Be like, oh, there's Lisa's dog. Now I know what he looks like. I always hear him in the background, but I never knew what he looked like. You know?
Yeah, definitely. I agree. I think there is an aspect where we get to know each other on a more personal level when we see, your home and your background and things like that, I think it becomes challenging. I've noticed a few things that are interesting. Number one is when you have a meeting and people don't put on their video. And I think that's an interesting sort of phenomenon. Now, I get it. Sometimes people don't want to be seen for whatever reason. But if you were in a meeting at work, you wouldn't get the choice to like turn yourself off. So I just think it's interesting.
No, and I agree. And I think for me, the way I look at it is like, it's about making that connection because we're already so far away, because we're already not meeting in person. Turning on your camera allows the other person to see you, and it's sometimes try to make that connection with you, whether or not it's not really, we can't make eye contact because we're looking at our phones, we're looking at the camera on our computers and our laptop, but at least it feels like we're making eye contact and seeing one another and like being able to talk and read each other's emotions. And as humans, we rely heavily on nonverbal cues and verbal cues, so we need to have both together, because when we only have one of them, we kind of don't get the entire message, and we then become uncertain, like, okay, what is that person really saying? Like, I can't see the little twitches on their face. Are they
Yeah.
smiling? Are they concerned? Are their brows furrowed? Like, are they relaxed? So
Yeah, I'm with you. I think facial expressions say so much. And if you don't see somebody you're talking to, I think the other thing is when you're in a Zoom and there's multiple people, if you can't see them, you can't tell who's going to talk and when. And it's interesting because if you have a bunch of people and you see their video, it's easier to figure out when you can actually speak versus talking over other people, because you can see as people begin to just start to speak. I don't know, there's something about that. And I feel like in a way you have a much better conversation because you can see everybody and when they're planning on speaking.
oh yeah, absolutely, I totally agree.
So I think that, Zoom is a big sort of change. I know I wanted to ask you also about, I think when I look at, there's different types of sort of etiquette. There's sort of the hygiene, there's courtesy, and then there's sort of the social norms. So I feel like with COVID,
Hmm.
there's a big part that's just sort of the hygiene part of it, like the wearing of masks, going out to dinner now. Like all of these kind of things are changing. What are some of the things that you're seeing from that point of view?
So I know that, mass is a huge point of debate in the States right now, at least, because in Taiwan here, we're very used to wearing masks. It's been a cultural thing since SARS back in 2003. So I remember seeing a video by Dan Levy, who is one of the stars of Schitt's Creek,
Oh yeah.
and I don't know if you saw it, but his whole point was, he was trying to address like, look, I understand that you may not want to wear a mask, but think about it that you're actually it's an act of kindness rather than anything else. That you may be helping that person who just walked by you who has a kid who is immunocompromised or a relative who is immunocompromised, but you don't know you're helping them. But it's just the thought of consideration, the action, the kindness that you're putting forth by protecting yourself and protecting them. And you just never know what the other person is going through. So it's better to just be kind rather than regret later, like, oh, I should have, like, if you heard about it, and be like, oh, I didn't mean to not wear a mask, not knowing, let's say your husband is immunocompromised and have been so close to you and passed something on to you without knowing, because a lot of us are asymptomatic. So we may never get it, but we could pass it to someone else.
Yeah, definitely. And I think, I mean, I've seen some really fun masks. People are really creative.
Oh, yeah.
It was going to become its own fashion statement, I am sure. I think that's kind of interesting. What do you think about like just how dining is going to change? First of all, most places I'm in California, so
Hmm.
you can eat outside. I think there's very few places that you can really eat inside. But how does that change etiquette?
So I definitely think it's going to take some time to come back. I recently did do a contribute to an article on the Chicago Tribune. Basically, they were asking like, so what if friends right now, like as states ease their restrictions on shelter in place and opening up restaurants and bars, and if you don't feel comfortable going out, like if your friends invited you, your family, people outside of your household invites you to dinner, and how do you communicate your concerns? And so my first thing, like I said earlier, it's that communication is key. So let's say I invite you out to dinner, right? And you're like, I don't feel comfortable. I'm so sorry. And just let me know. Be like, hey, you know, go ahead without me. Thanks for the invitation. I really appreciate it. You know, but maybe next time for me. But go ahead without me this time if you guys really, really do want to meet in person. Or we can propose a virtual Zoom dinner, right? Like, and we can make it a little more fun. We'll order for the other person. It's like Secret Santa, like buying the present for the other person.
Well, that's a good
So
idea.
yeah, and then everyone doesn't know what's going to show up at their door, but it's a fun thing because someone else is buying you dinner, and you're buying dinner for someone else.
Yeah, and
Or
I
like,
still think there's the opportunity for social distance.
oh yeah,
Which,
and like dining outside too, like going on a picnic. Like you guys can all pick up food from a different restaurant, your own restaurant, and make sure just there's just enough space outside for everyone to practice social distancing.
so when you think about just sort of etiquette and right now, what are like some of the main tips you have for people to think about from the point of view of like what can we be doing that is better for kindness and is better for, just like you said, like what are some things we can do to, because it's a tough time right now that just shows that we do care about other people.
Yeah, I mean, one thing is, I think delivery and takeout is still going to be huge. And I know a lot at in the past, pre-COVID, put it this way,
Yeah.
pre-COVID, when we did takeout, we didn't necessarily have to tip because we were the ones taking out from the restaurant. So what I started doing, whether it was delivery or takeout, I would still leave a tip, whatever I could, just to show that I'm supporting the community, supporting the restaurant, whatever they need, because it's still hard times. Like they're still being hit because they can't see
Oh,
any customers.
I totally agree. I really feel for restaurants. I mean, it doesn't feel like it's getting any better.
Exactly. And so I think, however much you can help. And I also like to remind people that like, don't feel guilty if you can't help more. Like also be mindful of your own situation. Like don't tip $10 if you can really only tip 3 or 5. Like because you also need to protect yourself as well. Like it's about both. It's like helping others while keeping yourself protected. And that means whether it comes to your health and safety or your financial situation, because it's hard for everyone economically right now. It's not just the restaurants. It's also like people may be laid off, they may be furloughed, whatever it is. So you're doing your part by helping. Like you could go volunteer or do something like that helps you, but also you feel
Absolutely.
you're helping the community in general.
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree. I think that, we need to, as individuals, just think before we do, what are ways that we can. I feel like we all kind of take that point of view of kindness and we're helping each other. Like now is the time to do that for sure. Um, when it comes to like etiquette, and for me, what I think we've had for these conversations, I think it is so unbelievably fascinating how we ended up with the things that we do today. I mean, have not spent a lot of time understanding all of that, but we've had some really interesting conversations just about why we do what we do. Like, why, in if you were in England, for example, you eat with your fork and your knife at the exact same time,
Mm-hmm.
whereas in America, we usually tend to, depending some, put your knife down in between a bite. And you were explaining to me, and I thought that was so interesting why that is.
Yeah, so basically, forks weren't a really huge thing at the beginning of time. So forks were actually the last piece of like dinnerware to kind of come into popularity. Like, so the first thing would be the spoon, right? Because we could make a spoon out of a shell or like any kind of shell. That was like the
Right.
first thing we did. And then we had the knife. So before forks were a huge thing in Europe, and like when there were a lot of when people first made the pilgrimage to the States, there wasn't a lot of resources available. And like even importing was expensive. We all knew that. It was hard. We had to go across the Atlantic and everything. So so this actually has to also do with how knives were made, how knives changed too. So back in the day, back in I would say the 17th, 16th century, there were two things that happened at the same time. So a French cardinal basically was hosting a dinner, And then what he found really uncomfortable with was that at the dinner table, his guests started picking their teeth with the tip of the knife. So he was like, well, I don't really want to see people picking their teeth at my table with the tip of my,
So this
with,
was before toothpicks.
yeah, before toothpicks were around. And so he was like, okay, this is, he didn't like it. He's like, this is gross. I don't like it at all. And at the same time, it was King Louis the 13th that actually ordered for knives tip to be blunt, like to be rounded out, because I think there were a lot of killings and people were just stabbing one another off the streets. And he was like, okay, we can't
Crazy.
we can't do this. He's like, no more. Like table knives need to be rounded out. They're not used as like weapons. You know,
Right.
they should just be for meals. And so the rounded or the blunted tip knives were then shipped to the States. And so the thing was that it was really, so at the time in the States, it was mostly spoons and knives. So the problem is, okay, so let's say we're holding our spoons with our left hand and the knife with our right, right? We cut with our right hand. And so you can cut it, but you can't really use the spoon to like poke it down. So you're just kind of holding things in place. And though that's why the American style was created, because like once you cut it, then you would set your knife down, switch the spoon from the left to the right, and then scoop up your food and eat it instead.
It's so crazy. It's just so funny how things change, and unless you know this, like, how do you know all this, by the way?
So I went to finishing school in Switzerland in 2014, and it's just been fascinating for me because really the reason why I went to finishing school was because I wanted to know. I had all these questions. Like I graduated from USC in 2013. I started interning. I was traveling, and I'm like, am I, being an obnoxious person because I don't know etiquette? Am I not supposed to put my elbows on the table? Am I not supposed to dress this way? Like, because I'm going on interviews to get my first job. And I'm like, I had so many questions. I became super self-conscious, and I wanted to get like the right answer from a credible source, because I could have Googled all of this, and I did, but I had so many different versions of answers. And I was like, okay, I can't, what's the right one? Give me like just one thing and I know what to do. And that's what etiquette can do for you, is that then you're armed with all these information, and then you actually feel really confident about it because you're like, oh, I know how to do this. I know how to walk into a room of networking and like ask the right questions, and how to compose myself, how to have a proper handshake, and all these different things.
That's so interesting. I didn't even know they had finishing schools anymore. Is it really called finishing school?
Yeah, so they're actually called finishing schools. So it's because in the past, like a lot of royalties would send like their princesses or Dutch, like like young women before they were married to kind of finish them, to teach them like how to run a household, how to manage your staff, like how do you clean, how do you host, how do you be, all there are a lot of different things that are involved. Like let's say you're hosting dignitaries from another country, so how do you have a greeting line? And so we also learn not just like etiquette, but protocol. So like, when you see, let's say the president greeting like Queen Elizabeth from like, who is the host country? How do they stand in line and greet the guests for the reception? Like there are all these different things that you learned about, and like how are flags placed, like which comes on what order and things like that.
Wow. And if you were, I understood if you're going to be a diplomat or somebody, I'm just curious, did you see yourself going into something where that level of detail mattered?
It would have always been interesting. Like it's something that I can't say for certain that I would want to dive into, but I'm always like, oh, if the opportunity comes up to be able to work as a diplomat, or even just for the UN, just to
Yeah.
be able to meet people from different countries and cultures would be so fun and interesting, and learn about them and how they work. Because I think anyone who works in the UN is amazing because they speak at least 4 to 5 languages. And I love to learn more languages in different cultures and be able to travel.
Well, what I love about what you're doing is that, when I think about, again, when you think of finishing school, we talk about there is a level of elitism to that. That sounds very fancy and elite. But instead of taking that and using it as an opportunity to, you know, I think what I love is that you're turning it into an opportunity to create it etiquette into everyday manners, everyday ways that people can feel confident in social situations, be kind to each other, find ways to communicate when they maybe feel uncomfortable or they're not sure what to do. Like the fact that you're making it more broadly acceptable, more broadly appealing, making it not about social class, but really about just we're all in this together kind of approach. And I think that to me is what I love about the fact that you've actually created a company that's beyond etiquette, that is about, helping people to know how to navigate certain situations. I mean, there's no doubt about it. People get, if I was going to meet, the Queen of England, for example, I would be very nervous. What would I do? What would I say? How would I, like all of those kind of things. I mean, the chances of meeting her, but I think that even when you're meeting the CEO of a very big company, or maybe you're going into an interview with somebody who is extremely senior, or maybe they're from a different cultural background, like having that kind of, information, like you were saying, makes you much more confident.
Yeah, I always like to tell my clients, I'm like, I'm giving you these resources and tools so that you can actually focus on the person in front of you, the conversation you're having, rather than worry about what you're doing right or wrong. Because if we're having anxiety around which fork and knife to use, am I holding my water glass correctly, am I dressed properly, then we're not actually creating any space in our head to be like, oh, okay, this conversation, this person I'm talking to in front of me is actually the most important thing right now. Being present right now is more important than worrying about what I'm doing here. So once I know how I can hold a knife and fork, once I know how to place a napkin in my lap, I'm not thinking about that because it becomes automatic, right? It's like we're on autopilot.
Yeah. Well, then you're more interested in the actual words that someone's speaking and the conversation that people are having. Yeah, I totally get it. So when we were talking about, just some of the different etiquette and things that we can see changing, it'll be interesting because I think we'll probably look back and say, oh, these new things that we're doing are going to be sort of that post-COVID. Any
Yeah.
predictions for anything you think is going to become the new better versus the new normal?
I definitely think temperature checks are going to be a new normal for now. I think for at least for the time being, and it's just really, like let's say temperature checks before you go into work, before you go into a restaurant. And it's not saying like, oh, we assume you're sick. It's never that. It's just like, okay, let's just check your temperature. If you're fine, they'll let you in. But if you're not, they'll kindly ask you to go home, or, like offer delivery or whatever it is. And so don't take it in a negative way that, oh, you're not allowing me into your restaurant because I have a fever. But like, no, but it's also protecting everyone else around you. So it's being considerate of everyone else around you and yourself too, because they don't want you to get even more sick or contract something else while in their restaurant unknowingly. So it
Yeah,
goes both ways.
yeah, totally. I agree.
And I also think, in terms of when it comes to business etiquette, we were talking about this yesterday. So I definitely think, let's say if you've traveled abroad in the last 14 days, they may ask you to not come in-person meetings. Like you'll join virtually, such like through Zoom, through a voice call or whatever it is. And if you're showing symptoms, stay home. I think a lot more companies will be more understanding towards staying home when you're sick. I think like with American and even like Asian culture, like, there are very hardworking office cultures. Like, okay, I'm going to come to the office all the time, show up to prove that I'm hardworking. But also, like, if you're sick, if you're showing symptoms, like, stay home. I think companies will become a lot more understanding around those issues rather than think, oh, you're just playing hooky. You're just pretending you're sick, and it's
Yeah.
more, so it's that. And I think public health and safety will be considered and put more into more protocols instead.
I hope so. And I think it's interesting because the idea that if I'm working from home, I'm not working as hard. I think it's beginning to change because I know so many people who, now that they're working from home, have never worked so hard because the separation of work and personal life is so blurred. There are people who, like, get up and they're on Zoom calls for, 10 hours. They're lucky if they get to eat lunch.
Oh yeah, no, I've heard stories where I have friends and colleagues that are like having meetings from 8 to 8, and I'm like, that's crazy. I'm like, we don't even have that when you're going to the office,
Yeah, exactly. I know, it's true. And that's when you don't always want to have your camera on.
which we can understand. It's
Yeah,
like it's been a
totally.
long day, so.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. It's so fascinating. I mean, I think the whole, changes, the things that we're going to be, going through, like it's like a point in history that when we look at some of the social norms and historically how they happened, now we're at this new point, and what's going to be happening moving forward, we're going to be able to look back and we're going to know that so many of these behaviors and manners and social norms grew out of what is clearly just unprecedented, that we're in the middle of a pandemic.
Yeah, and I think, I always like to remind people, like, look, because we're going through such unprecedented times, it's important to remember not to be hypercritical of others and yourself, because we do have varying degrees when it comes to taking precautionary measures when it comes to our health and safety. So like you may be doing something and like you're like, oh, how could she not wash her hands, or how is she not wearing her mask, or whatever it is. But like, don't be judgmental. Like, be like, just try to be like, maybe there's something going on that I just don't see. Like, I have no idea what's going on in their life. I'm just judging based on what I see on the surface right now. And like, maybe you just forgot your mask in your car and you're gonna run back right now. Like, for a brief
Yeah.
second, you're like, oh no, I forgot, but I have it in my car. I have a hand sanitizer, whatever it is.
Yeah.
Just don't judge someone because of like, we're all still adapting to this. We're still trying to figure out what's going on and what's going to be our new normal for the time being.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I think that's such a great point of view. I mean, I've had the, oh my God, I forgot my mask panic. Um, and it happens, but I think you're right. I think, and again, it goes back to even how we started this. This is a moment in time where we can learn from each other, but we should all kind of, I think, go from the point of view of kindness. Like, what can we do to
Absolutely.
help each other out? So, I know it's now 4 o'clock in the morning there. I know you probably want to get back to sleep. So I wanted to thank you so much for joining me today.
It's
I
been so
really appreciate
fun.
it. I'm really,
Thank
really,
you.
I
No,
love
thank
talking to you. It's like my favorite conversation because I always learn so many things that I didn't know that I think are super interesting. So I want to do this again,
yes.
especially when we see some of the new betters coming, and what are those behaviors and how are things changing. And I'll put this, I'll save it to my IGTV, and then I also put it on YouTube and some of my other channels, and I'll send it to you as well so you have it if you want to use it.
Awesome. I love it.
Awesome. Thanks, Bonnie. I really appreciate
Thank
it.
you.
And please get some sleep.
I
Enjoy
will.
Taiwan.
Thank you.
It's amazing that you're on the other side of the world, and see, we're even having conversations. I love it.
I know. This is great. I mean, I always love talking to you about this stuff. So
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you, Bonnie, from
thank
Beyond
you.
It. All right. Have a good day.
You too. Bye.
Bye.